Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Finally, 4 years later, even just about, to the GOWEN Racing Podcast. We have brought it back for this year. We're going to give it a run and see how it goes. Fresh off of the start of the new NASCAR season, just with the Clash this weekend. We're excited to talk about that. Same two people, myself, and I am joined as usual by Mr. Jay Cook himself. Jay, how you doing today?
I'm doing quite all right. I'm ready to discuss motorsports topics.
I would hope so, since this is a podcast about motorsports. We're going to keep it the same as it was last time that we were doing this. NASCAR, of course, the main focus, but of course, we're also going to talk about other motorsports and touch on those as those are happening throughout the year, including Formula One, IndyCar. Most notably today, we'll be talking about IMSA, as Jay and I both took in the 24 hours of Daytona just a couple of weekends ago, and we had a blast there, and we'll go into that and our experience and thoughts on the race itself towards the end of this first episode. But we're not going to waste any time. We, of course, had the Clash this past weekend, and we want to talk about that first, Jay, since that's most fresh in our minds. And of course, they came to Bowman Gray for the first time in 5 decades, just about, with the Cup Series cars. Obviously not a points paying race, but we knew probably right off the bat that it was kind of a setup for chaos. But I would say it turned into maybe you would call it a bit of a beautiful chaos, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, NASCAR definitely seemed like they were setting it up and almost kind of encouraging the drivers to create chaos and create tension with each other and incidents and all that nonsense, which we saw a lot of to start the race or to start the heats and into the last chance qualifier. But I would say the actual Clash itself, the actual 200 lap event, was a perfect mix of clean racing, a little bit of beating and banging, and overall, I really enjoyed the Clash and really enjoyed the Clash for the first time in several years. I enjoyed it at the Coliseum, but the other night at Bowman Gray, it was much better than it's been in a long time, in my opinion.
I would say, based off of just like previous years, like the last 2 years with the LA Clash, I left the LA Clash enjoying the concept and the idea, but not necessarily enjoying the actual race, versus the Bowman Gray idea. I didn't enjoy the idea as much as the LA idea, but I found that overall, because of the racing, I ended up probably enjoying that a lot more, because I don't know, it felt more authentic short track racing to me. I don't know if you felt the same about that.
No, I do agree with you, and I think the thing that helped was the fact that the Coliseum, the corners were so tight, so narrow, and so quick, and then straightaways just non-existent. And with Bowman Gray, it's like an actual shaped like a short track. It is an actual short track, so that helped a lot. And then of course there's just the whole, it's the madhouse. It's you go there and hit each other out of the way. You go there to make each other mad. You go there to piss each other off. So they tried to do that in the heats. Thankfully, it didn't carry over into the 200 lap event, because I think that would have made a lot of people, at least it would have made me annoyed and kind of bored and whatever, if it had just continued into everything was just they were destroying each other every lap and whatever. But I enjoyed the race a lot, and I kind of hope they bring it back. I know they're talking about potentially moving it to other places. If they do, maybe Bowman Gray gets an all-star race. I don't know, but I kind of would enjoy it to see Bowman Gray on the schedule in some capacity still in the future.
I absolutely agree, and we can dive more into that specific idea shortly too, because it's an interesting topic. But we look at the heats started off in the four heats were won by Chase Elliott in the first heat, Chris Buescher heat 2, Denny Hamlin heat 3, Tyler Reddick the fourth heat. The second and third and fourth heats were all fairly clean compared to the first heat, which I remember that heat was filled with chaos for about the first, I would say, 10 laps or so. They just continuously were bringing out yellows, and then they cleaned it up after that. And Chase Elliott, of course, cruised to the win there after a clean sweep of the entire weekend. Honestly, one of the most dominant performances I've seen, I think, ever in a Clash. I think it was the most laps ever led in a Clash as well, by any driver, which is not hard to do, because most Clashes, of course, were less than 100 laps up until just a few years ago, and I think he led 71 laps this
Something like
past
that.
weekend.
It was a lot.
Yeah, and only 200 laps, of course. So he led a very large majority of that race. But I had like concerns early on. I don't know if it's just because I wasn't embracing the Bowman Gray idea, but from previous seasons, I know one of the kind of points that fans didn't like the LA Clash. There were several reasons, but one of them was the just constant crashing of each other, and then we go to Bowman Gray, and that we got the same thing right off the bat. And I was surprised at the time to see people praising the exact same thing they hated on when we were back in LA. But overall, like I said, I feel like as the 2 days went on, I kind of embraced it more, and kind of, I don't know, my mindset changed, I would say, halfway through the weekend, and previously would not have liked it, but then kind of, I don't know, I found myself enjoying the drama of it a little bit.
Yeah, after the first heat, I think you and I both were of the same mindset of this is going to be silly. This entire weekend is just going to be people destroying each other. Like, why are we here? What are we doing? And probably halfway through the second or third heat was when I really started to change my mind. I started to come around to it, and then I really started to enjoy it. And it did not keep being everybody just running over each other, which was kind of nice. It was nice. It was nice to have a little bit of that, but it was also nice to have clean, nice Cup Series racing. Because for a moment there, in the first 10 laps or so of the first heat, it was like these are not professional Cup Series drivers. What in the world are? It's the Clash. Why are we driving like this? What are we doing? I realized that it's supposed to be like this. It's Bowman Gray, but still, it was a bit silly to start off. So I enjoyed the rest of the event. Really came around on it, and that's why I'm in support of it either going back there again next year or maybe even getting an all-star race in the future. But I thought it was a really nice way to start off the NASCAR season, and on top of that, I thought it was also just really nice to have maybe a showing of one of NASCAR's grassroots tracks. Not only a showing of it, but getting some updates to it, showing that NASCAR still does support the short tracks around the country. So that was also an advantage and a nice part about it as well.
And I think it's important that NASCAR balances, focusing on the grassroots side of the sport, but also continuing to do the kind of expanding the boundaries of the sport. And I think they're doing a good job of that right now. I mean, they bring in the Bowman Gray Clash. They brought back North Wilkesboro. They're bringing back Rockingham into the Trucks and Xfinity Series. Wouldn't be surprised if that hits a Cup roster, maybe if those two races do well. But also, they're going for those expansion ideas of going to Mexico City this year, and then there's been talk of Brazil as well. So I think as long as they have a good balance of it, I think we're in a really good position. I think, Jade, that right now, I feel like in terms of that balance of grassroots and expanding the boundaries of the sport, I feel like this is currently like the best the sport has ever actually been able to do with that idea.
Oh yeah, schedule diversity across the board for the last several years has been way better than it was in the past, especially you think 15, 20 years ago, where it was just mile and a half, 17 times a year, and then short tracks and 2 road courses and the super speedways. The schedule diversity now is so much different, and it's also really nice as well that NASCAR is trying these other types of events. Even if they only last 2 or 3 years, I think it's okay if they try an event and it only lasts for a couple of years, because, that was the problem with the schedule before, is that they went to mile and a half for so many years and years and years and years, and it just got stale over time. I think creating new events that only last for a couple of years is a good thing. Try it out, get your schedule a bit more diverse, move on to something else, try that out, and move on to something else after that. So I think the NASCAR is doing a really nice job. One of the few things they are doing a really nice job of right now is the schedule diversity and trying new events and trying to get the sport into bigger and different markets and really push themselves to be not just, hey, we're rednecks and make left turns. Obviously, it hasn't. That stereotype still exists, and it's going to take a lot to get away from that. But they're at least trying.
And I know the schedule talk and the expanding the horizons of the sport is definitely going to be a conversation we have quite a few times this year, especially when the schedules start to come out. We know there's been talk as well of a Canada race, but we also have talk of other types of short tracks that have been brought up that are more grassroots tracks. So it's going to be interesting to see where we go over the next couple of seasons when it comes to scheduling and where NASCAR is interested and willing to go as well. Focusing back on the Clash, we had as well after those heats, the last chance qualifier the top two, of course, advance in that. Kyle Larson, Josh Berry moved on in that last chance qualifier. Jay, that was probably the last chance. Probably the most chaotic part of the entire weekend. You could tell it was kind of gloves off type style racing. Everyone was going after it and doing whatever it took to try and advance themselves into those top two spots.
Yeah, they certainly got really desperate towards the end of that race, and it was honestly, it was a desperation that wasn't annoying to watch. It was really fun to watch because I mean, you had Larson and Barry and Austin Dillon and all these different guys battling for the lead and battling for the top two, and they kept bumping each other way out of the way on restarts and trying to hang on the outside line and couldn't do it. And guys were getting turned and spun, really trying to fight hard to keep those top two positions. So again, I think it goes back to the format of the Clash. It was really nice because they knew those top two spots is where they had to be. And for a guy like Kyle Larson, that's a lot of pressure to put on him because obviously Ryan Blaney already locked himself in with the highest in points provisional. And if you're Kyle Larson as well and you try for Hendrick and your teammates are already in it, you don't want to be left out of that main event at the Clash. So there's a lot of pressure on him, a lot of pressure on all the drivers, and they all really showed it. And they were all really fighting hard for it. And it was kind of fun to see how much they cared to try and make it into the main event. And they did it in a way where they were racing each other rough, but they weren't completely destroying each other and just driving like absolute morons.
It was fun to watch. I think, and outside of that, the notable part, Ty Gibbs as well. I mean, he started right up front there and ended up missing the main event after he started going backwards, and he crashed a couple of times. But there was the one part, I forget what driver he was beefing with.
It was Justin Haley, wasn't
Justin, yeah, I think it was. Yes, it was Justin Haley, and of course, he, I guess, got turned around by the 7. I mean, everyone was running into each other in that whole mess. But Gibbs upset with Haley and proceeds under caution to come up alongside, run into him. No big deal, but somehow, one way or another, the way the cars connect, he jumps up over top, gets a bit airborne, a few feet off the ground, and that turned into a bit of a moment. I'm sure it was not a good feeling coming back down onto the ground, but I found it interesting, Jay, and this is I saw this about 10 minutes before we started recording, that NASCAR was going to have a talk with Gibbs about that under caution retaliation, and I was a bit surprised by that with the nature of the event, what NASCAR was pushing for, that they would even bother to have a conversation with a driver over that. Maybe they're kind of overthinking it because his car got off the ground a little bit.
I mean, we've seen in the past before that NASCAR has really not enjoyed when somebody gets retaliation under yellow. So it's not that surprising to me that they're going to at least have a chat with Ty Gibbs about that. But I mean, perhaps they should have a chat with him about it, because retaliation like that under yellow is not great to do. I don't think Gibbs tried to send himself airborne like that. I think he was just trying to give him a tap. And then the way these cars are, we've seen that a bunch with these cars, is they get airborne when you don't think they will, when just having side-by-side contact. So, it's not surprising to see NASCAR cracking down on that when you think about the new rules for this year as well, when they're really cracking down on how aggressive a driver is and really cracking down on their ability to make the playoffs if they get themselves suspended. So I'm not surprised to see NASCAR doing that. I don't think it's that bad of a thing that they're at least having a chat with him as well. I don't see a problem with it, really.
You accidentally mentioned Ty Dillon. I completely forgot he was even in the Cup Series until the last chance qualifier, and of course, like the first time I noticed him, he's just getting jumped and running into other cars.
Him and his brother were fighting for the first 5 or 6 laps of that race, if not a little bit longer. And that was entertaining to watch, at least, because all they were doing was just running into each other and moving each other out of the way. So they at least put on a show for a few laps.
It was interesting to watch them go at it. Yeah, it was pretty funny there for the few laps that they were up front. Austin Dillon did get back up towards the front, towards the tail end, but unfortunately for him, did not advance into the main 200-lap race, which we'll go on about now. 200 laps in the Clash. And there was a good balance between the drama and the chaos, but also just some straight-up clean, short-track racing. One thing that I really enjoyed from just the race there, Jay, was short tracks have struggled a lot with the next gen car alongside
Yeah.
like road courses and whatnot. But what I noticed there is, although Elliott, I mean, he was just a class to the field, but we saw Ryan Blaney start dead last, and he was able to work his way through the entire field, got up to second. We saw some comers and goers. Hamlin came on strong towards the end of the first run, so it's something that it seems to struggle a bit is with the comers and goers with tire fall off and whatnot, but it seemed like we got a little bit more of that. Still doesn't feel like we are where we need to be with the short track package, but it's just, okay, we're continuing to at least see bits of improvement as the seasons go on with this new car.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to weigh too much on anything that happened in that race on whether the short track package or the cars are going to be better at short tracks this year. I don't know if you can really take a lot of what happens at that track compared to Martinsville, even though they're the same style of track. But I will say it was nice and impressive to watch Ryan Blaney start dead last, and by the end of the first 50 laps, I think he was closing in on the top five, and then or the first 100 laps, I mean, and then of course he marches his way all the way to second and had a chance at Chase Elliott in the final segment of the race as well. So it was nice to see that happen. Of course, Hamlin, like you mentioned, had a really good run. There was multiple times in that race where drivers seemed like they were able to take advantage of the softer tires on the longer run, and if they had saved their tires enough, they could move their way forward, which was kind of nice to see. And of course, Goodyear brought their softest tire available again to Bowman Gray this past weekend. So I maybe they'll continue to do that for short tracks this year. Maybe that'll make a difference. I don't really know. But if there is something to learn from Bowman Gray, hopefully it will translate to the rest of the season with short tracks. Because, like you said, for the last however many years we've had the next gen now, they have been the worst part of this car, and they went from one of the best parts of the sport to now just I don't even want to watch Martinsville anymore.
Yeah, and they've made it better, but still not close to, the era that we grew up in, which would be the Gen 6 era. And I mean, the short tracks, Martinsville specifically, was always a treat to take in. And now you come here in the next gen car, and we dread going to Martinsville, watching a race, just because we know that it's going to be lacking. And I mean, like I said, last year was a little bit better in that playoff round of 8 finale compared to like the year before. And the year before was a little bit better than the first season of the next gen car, but still not quite to the point where we feel like it needs to be. But hopefully it improves continuously going forward. But yeah, we saw Chase Elliott just dominate. He did lose the lead at one point, got it back quickly after that halfway break. And honestly, Jay, I mean, it kind of looked like, although like you already said, and I fully agree, I mean, you take this race here basically with a grain of salt. It doesn't really mean anything going forward, but that was probably the best we've seen Chase Elliott look in probably 2-3 years.
Yes, 2 years at least for sure. That was his most dominant performance in a long time, and he really showed up and was immediately the class of the field, and of course showed that by leading. I think you said 171 laps. Certainly led a far majority of that race. And there was a moment where Hamlin passed him, and it wasn't very long before Chase Elliott was right back by him again and running away with the lead. So the car for sure showed up to the Clash, was ready to compete, and they dominated the thing. I don't know, I'm not sure how much you can look into the performance of a Clash and say, well, this is how their season's going to be now, whether that be Bowman Gray or Daytona or wherever. But certainly for Chase Elliott, for that team, it is a good confidence boost. They're the only team to win this season. So at the very least, they're all going to be very confident heading into Daytona. And we'll see if that carries over to the season or not.
And I'm just looking at the rest of the finishing results, just a few notables. Of course, Larson never really went far in the Clash. He kind of drove up through into the mid-teens, and then he ended up wrecking a couple of times. So that wasn't quite the result for him. Blaney, of course, going all the way up to second. But two notables I pay attention to that are in the top 5, Jays. Denny Hamlin in third, Bubba Wallace in fifth, mainly because both of those drivers paired with new crew chiefs. And Hamlin's had some doubts, of course. He's basically, he's taking Ty Gibbs' crew chief from previous seasons. And that was a bit of a surprise to everyone because he was of course, meshing so well over the years with Chris Gabehart, who's moved into a new role at Joe Gibbs Racing. But yeah, I mean, it's still a full season ahead. Anything can happen, but still, it was nice to see that he was able to have a very respectable run, just like Bubba Wallace did with his new crew chief this weekend.
And I will say, you mentioned new crew chiefs for the both of those drivers, but not only that, they also had a busy and hectic offseason
Oh,
filled with
yeah.
uncertainty for, of course, for Hamlin for owning the team, Bubba for the team he drives for. So they had an offseason filled with just not being able to focus fully on this upcoming season. There was a lot of stuff, a lot of other stuff they had to focus on. Of course, Tyler Reddick and Riley Herbst as well alongside of that. But I will say for Hamlin, when he showed out or when he showed up for practice, I think it was 10, 15 minutes into his practice session, he was pulling off into the garage. He looked slow, he looks terrible, and I was already in my mind like, oh, the season's already over for Hamlin. I was already counting him off. Like, with his new crew chief that he's got, Chris Gale, I was like, there's no way if that car is bad. I've never seen this man adjust the car to be good. And then Hamlin comes back out, and I think it was either in their practice 2 or their qualifying session, and I think he was top of the board. And then, of course, he looked pretty good in the Clash as well. So maybe Hamlin will be the right fit for Chris Gale. I don't know. But, of course, a championship is the one thing left for Denny Hamlin to accomplish, and that's the one thing that everybody still questions him about and questions about his legacy in the sport is he does not have a championship. And, I mean, he's not getting younger. So I would say this is his best year, but I say that because he's not getting younger. Who knows if he's going to have how many more years he's going to have to get a shot at a championship.
Yeah, very true. I think he's got another year or two, maybe. But you mentioned the concern about, oh, his year's over already. Speaking of that, how about Kyle Busch? How do you think his fans are feeling after that weekend?
I think his fans probably gave up hope sometime last year, and they didn't have any coming into this year. I mean, unfortunately for Kyle Busch, since moving to the 8 car and having a decent first year, last year was the season from hell for Kyle Busch, and unfortunately, it continued into the Clash this past weekend. I hope that does not continue into the regular season because, I mean, it's kind of I used to hate Kyle Busch, and now he's moved like Jimmy Johnson was for me, where I'm rooting for Kyle Busch to get wins and to do well and perform well. And I don't want to see him continue to just run every week, either really bad or have a good run, and then something out completely out of his control happens. And that's all his season was last year. So I hope Kyle Busch and the 8 team can turn it around this year and find their way to victory lane, hopefully multiple times.
Now, do you think they will? Because I personally, I don't see
I don't
RCR
expect
getting
it.
any better.
Yeah, I don't expect it. I'm not sure if that team. I don't know if I see either Kyle Busch or Austin Dillon getting a win at a non-super speedway track this year. Uh, of course, like I said, I want Kyle Busch to win. I just don't. I don't see the team improving. I don't really have high expectations for RCR at all, really.
Yeah, well, wait and see. Hopefully, Kyle Busch has a better season this time around. Playoffs, wins, whatever it might be. He needs to get back to victory lane. I think he is still fantastic driver. I don't think he's lost anything. It's just, of course,
No, not at all.
he is his team and his car is holding him back quite significantly over the past year. But yeah, and he's also in a contract year, so you'd wonder, is he going to remain with the team or is he going to have an opportunity to jump up to a better team? I was already saying, I think we talked about this recently, I think that someone, I mean, you would think a top team, it has to be looking at him still, and if they have a seat open up, that you would want Kyle Busch in your car. If I was, I floated the idea of Hendrick Motorsports and Alex Bowman's contract coming up. If I could put Kyle Busch in that 48 car, I would do whatever I could to make that happen.
But if you're Hendrick, of course, and if you're any team owner, you need sponsorship money. And do you really expect Kyle Busch to bring the same sponsorship money as Alex Bowman will right now with the backing from Ally?
I would just have to hope that his statistics is going to be the backing force of bringing that sponsorship.
No, I'd certainly agree with you. I would also like to see Kyle Busch move to Hendrick, but I think that I don't think I know that sponsors and money moves the world of today or today's world in NASCAR. And I don't see, unless Ally does not want to support Alex Bowman anymore, I do not see a world where Bowman gets out of that seat I think it's going to be solely up to what Ally wants to do.
I should also say I don't think Hendrick needs to make a single roster change for the next few
No.
years. I think Alex Bowman's fine. Their whole lineup is flawless there. But you do hope to see Kyle Busch get something better at some point because he deserves to be in a better car. Another couple notables here from the Clash, two specifically. We'll talk about Shane Van Gisbergen, of course. Jay and I are both big fans of SVG, and now he's first season full time in the Cup Series with Trackhouse, their third car in the number 88. Beautiful paint scheme on that car with I love the Red Bull accents, and then you notice they had the Red Bull sponsorship on the back spoiler.
I did, yes.
I actually thought that was really cool.
I don't know if that's something that NASCAR is going to allow during the regular season.
It is.
That may have just been It is really.
Yeah, it was when they came out with the new sponsor placements. The spoiler was included in the window net too, but no one's utilizing that.
Yeah, I saw the window net part. I didn't remember seeing the spoiler part. Well, that's cool then. I kind of hope that more teams start to do that, and maybe not a tacky way, because the way the Trackhouse did it looked nice. You could certainly do it in a tacky way, kind of like some of those teams putting the sponsors on the front side of the roof, right above the windshield. I'm not a huge fan of that. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that. It looks ugly. But the spoiler one, at least Trackhouse's version of it, looked cool. I hope other teams do it, but I imagine some will do it in a way that does not look good at all.
I also like how RFK always like the Fastenal cars. They put the little Fastenal logo along the top of the front headlights. I always think that looks pretty cool as well. But back on SVG, thought that he ran a great first time out in a full-time Cup car on an oval as well, of course. But he had a full season to adapt to ovals in an Xfinity car. One season is not going to be enough to get where you need to be on a type of track you're not used to. So I thought that his effort there in Bowman Gray P9, just honestly, I don't think you could ask for much more than that, Jay.
Yeah, I think he had to be impressed with it, I think he had to be happy with himself with his run at the Clash at the Bowman Gray. I didn't expect much from SVG coming into the weekend. I kind of expected to see him into the LCQ, and then we wouldn't really see any more of him from there because I thought there was no way he'd be top 2 in LCQ. But he goes into his heat, of course, makes to the main event, and then in the main event, he marched his way forward and eventually got into the top 10 towards the end of the race, and that's where he finished in P9. So a really decent run for SVG at a short track, and I hope that maybe he can continue that into some other different types of tracks this season. Of course, like you said, the one full year in Xfinity last year, not going to be enough to give him all the experience he needs, but it's also not like he's some 18-year-old that's never really ran race cars before. The guy is 34 or 35, I think, in his mid-30s for sure, has all kind of experience driving almost any type of car in the world, so maybe SVG isn't going to need all those seasons you think he will, and maybe he'll come out this year, and I don't know if he's going to win anything other than a road course maybe, but if he could rack off some top 10s consistently, that would be, I think, really impressive to see.
I think I noticed a big difference in Shane Van Gisbergen compared to any other driver that's been in a similar position to him where they came over to NASCAR from a different type of motorsport. And the difference is I noticed that Shane adapts to the style of NASCAR more than I've ever seen anyone else. He fully embraces the aggression, the physicality, which I've never seen any other driver do other than like Juan Pablo Montoya when he was like running into Tony Stewart, crashing him. But that was like the only bit. So I think SVG is he's adapting really well and understands what it's going to take to be successful in NASCAR. And as well, these guys, Jay, they're not going to be easy on him compared to other drivers because he is someone that's not from the NASCAR world. So they're not going to give him an easy time. So he's going to have to adapt and embrace that physicality because he's certainly going to get some of it.
Well, in the NASCAR world as well, he is a rookie, and especially in the Cup Series, rookies typically do not get a lot of breaks, and they do not get given a lot of respect until they show that they can earn it, until they show that they deserve to be in the Cup Series. Cup drivers are notoriously ruthless on taking advantage of rookies as far as moving them out of the way on track, not giving them a bunch of space, because they obviously they don't know how you race, and they want you to show that you earn your spot in the Cup Series. So I think SVG is going to have to earn a spot this year. He's going to have to show that he deserves to be in the Cup Series if that's where he wants to be. But still, I mean, he's already proven a bunch of different times in the Xfinity Series he can run really well. He's just got to have that transfer to the Cup Series. Uh, he came into Chicago the first time that they went to Chicago. He won that race. He won in his first NASCAR start. So there's that too. But I think he's going to have a decent year. Again, I think top tens is the goal for SVG on a consistent basis. And anything more than that is a bonus. And then maybe looking into year two, year three is when you want to start see him winning races and maybe winning more ovals as well.
I would definitely want to see him winning an oval, at least by his third year. I would say, yeah, year two, I would be expecting, consistency, top tens, top 15s at the least you would want. I still think this year I would expect him to run obviously great and maybe win on some road courses, and that's going to get him into the playoffs. But I think that although he ran that Xfinity season, he's still in a very different driving car now. I still think that this season is still on the oval part, once again, just gaining experience and learning what he needs to learn about this car and what it's going to take to be successful on ovals.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's, the drivers that are in NASCAR talk about how different the Cup car drives from the Xfinity car. So that's going to be a learning curve for him as well. That these tracks he went to last year in the Xfinity car, maybe he drove one way. Well, this year he's going to have to drive it a different way. And, relearning stuff again, still, even in year two now year one officially in the Cup Series, year two full time in NASCAR. So the learning curve is going to be there for SVG. But if there's anybody that could do it pretty quickly, I think it would be Shane Van Gisbergen. So I'm not going to put extreme expectations onto him this year, but I also would not be surprised if we see him running really well. And of course, if not in the playoffs from a road course win, maybe fighting for a playoff spot on points.
It'll be an interesting and I think entertaining season to watch him adapt and get after it with the other guys on track. One more notable as well from the Clash before we move on. Ryan Preece, of course, lost his ride as SHR shut down. He's gone over now to the third car that just opened up at RFK. Of course, known for his short track talent. He had a quiet night, honestly. He ran P11 just behind one of his teammates there, of Chris Buescher. Yeah, I mean, didn't really hear a lot about him, but at least what I did notice was he seemed to be fairly on par with his teammates. So I would say just, a very small sample size, but seems to be a solid start for Ryan Preece, who I've personally doubted quite a bit in the Cup Series in the past.
Yeah, as you mentioned, he really kind of was on par with his teammates. RFK didn't show up looking like a super strong team to the Clash, but again, it's just a Clash, so there's not a whole lot to take away from it, I don't think. But if he's right there with his teammates, then that maybe shows that, maybe he's a bit stronger of a driver than you and I both have doubted him in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And so perhaps this is the year for Priest to really prove that he belongs in the Cup Series, and he's getting another chance. RFK decided to open a third team for him. They expanded to bring in Ryan Preece. So I think there might be some pressure on him as well. He knows that his chances in the Cup Series are they're not going to be infinite. He's not going to keep getting these rides, and he also knows, I'm sure, that RFK took a chance opening up that team and choosing him to be their driver. So the pressure is on, I think, for Ryan Preece, and we'll see if he lives up to it this year or not.
He's definitely a driver that is in a position of having to prove himself, which sometimes can actually get the best of that driver. We've seen Corey LaJoie, for example, last year had to prove himself, and he spent pretty well the entire season crashing himself under pressure. But that was the Clash. Yeah, we had a good time taking that in. Of course, now we have an off week, and then what is it? I guess, yeah, it's next weekend is the Daytona 500 weekend, isn't it?
Yeah, we have Super Bowl this weekend, and then it's Daytona after that. On Wednesday, we get practice and qualifying, I believe, on Wednesday, and then it all ramps up from there.
So we're recording this on Tuesday, so I guess, yeah, we're only like, a week and 2 days away from the duels then. So That's quite exciting. We're looking forward to that. We'll talk about that next week. We are going to do this. We're going to try to do this every week. We'll of course go more into dual racing and Daytona 500 stuff on that lead up week. So moving on from the Clash, sticking with NASCAR as well. There's been some rule changes over the offseason, a few notable ones that I wanted to bring up. One, actually, I've had an opinion change on one of them, which was the waiver, but we'll save that one for now. Literally just today it was announced, as we're recording this on Tuesday, the fastest lap point. So Formula One got rid of the fastest lap point. NASCAR says don't mind if we do, and they are now offering a point, one extra point for the fastest lap every race amongst all the top 3 series, which this has been an idea I've heard floated around of people just saying, imagine they did that, Jay. And I don't know how I feel about this, because just specifically, I feel like there is a few tracks where it's like a random draw of who's going to get the fastest lap, like a super speedway or something. And that there's no skill going into the fastest lap there. It's just hoping that you have the best pull from a draft on a specific lap. So I think it's cool, but as well, I'm curious to see if it leads to, like, I think as long as it's the broadcasts are doing a good job of covering that, because that 1 point, it very well could come down to a playoff scenario where someone might get eliminated because of a fastest lap point.
Now, this is something that was immediately brought up in my mind, and I don't think it's going to matter, because NASCAR just, for the Championship 4, they decide the champion by who wins.
Mm-hmm.
But if the champion wins the race, but a Championship 4 contender finishes second, well, actually, I guess it doesn't matter because there's 5 points of separation, so maybe not. Never mind. That kind of makes my point invalid.
Well, hold on.
Anyways, fastest lap point for the Championship 4, are they going to count that or not? That's the thing that was curious for me.
You get 40 points for winning a race. You get 35 for second. So what if the champion...
second and third.
So if the champion finishes second, he gets 35. What if third gets the 34 points but gets the fastest lap point?
Exactly, yeah.
He's now also got 35 points.
Yeah. They're now tied on points.
How do you...
So,
well, then they would just go on the best finish.
Award that?
It's the tiebreaker. You'd be second, though.
All right, I guess that is fair, but I think it would also be a bit silly to go off of tiebreaker then for that, because then somebody... Let's say that then the guy who finished third now wins the championship, and the race where NASCAR says it comes down to whoever finishes higher wins the championship. That's going to create even more discourse. So I would imagine that maybe NASCAR isn't going to count the fastest lap point in the final race for the Championship 4. If they do, and we run into that situation, I kind of can't wait to see the barn burn down and see how Twitter reacts to that one. Because it would be really funny to see maybe the first race of the round of that championship, or the first race. Actually, I guess it is just a one race round.
Yeah, it's
so
the only race.
So where would they get the next best finish from? Because that's how they've done it.
I would think they would just have to take it from that specific race.
Maybe.
He finished better than him. He still wins it.
Yeah, okay, maybe you're right. Actually, you're right. But still,
I could still see a drama coming out of that.
Do that. Yeah, I certainly could. Either way, awarding it or not awarding it, on Twitter, there's going to be discourse about it if we run into that situation. But overall, I like the idea. It is interesting to see how it would have also affected last season, because Christopher Bell wouldn't have needed to pass Bubba Wallace on the last lap last season to make the Final Four. So it is interesting to see how it would have changed last season. I think they said that Larson also would have made the Final Four last year if they had that scoring format. So it would have definitely made things different. It's going to make things different this year. And I wonder if it also maybe is NASCAR getting back to the way that it used to do years ago, where you get a bonus point for leading a lap, bonus point for leading most laps. I wonder if we're getting back into that era again, which I personally thought was wildly confusing. And in an era where the format can be confusing enough for a casual, we might be making it even more confusing with this bonus point stuff again.
I do agree. I think, I mean, I was quite young, 10 years old or so, when we were in that era of, you get a point for leading a lap, a point for leading the most laps and whatnot. But yeah, I do believe...
And the format at that time was confusing enough as well. It was, I mean, all the numbers were everywhere. You didn't know what, unless you were a hardcore NASCAR fan that paid attention to it every week and understood the format. I mean, me being 10, 11 years old, I didn't understand the points format. So, it's not quite that now, but still.
Yeah, like the winner was getting like 188 points, and then like second would get like 100 and like I don't know 73, and I'm like, you you didn't know what the heck was going on as a kid. But yeah, it's a good point brought up as well as just adding a bit more confusion to a system that seems to confuse people. I think the playoff format's relatively understandable, but there is a lot of people that complain about how they find it confusing, which is very valid. But I think as well, like I was just saying a few minutes ago, I think the broadcast plays a very important part
Yes.
in clearing that specific thing up. Like F1, when they did award it, which they've gotten rid of for this year, but you knew immediately who set the fastest lap. There was a big graphic that came up on the screen. It would show it beside their name, so you knew right in the moment who had it, who was going to get that point. Where I feel like Fox, who I was saying recently, I didn't see any improvement from last year in their production quality. I have very low hopes that they're going to do a good job conveying who's going to get that fastest lap point throughout the race.
I will just say I would expect NBC and Max and Prime to maybe come up with a graphic for that. I would not expect Fox to. I could certainly see Fox just giving us nothing to indicate who has the fastest lap, and then we move on to the other broadcast partners, and they do. Which again would also make it confusing because then you're going from one broadcast giving us one thing to the next giving us this thing. So I kind of hope they all three do it. It would be really nice to have that and maybe be consistent across all four different broadcast partners. But just a simple little color change to the graphic, or the driver like gets purple, or because that's Xfinity's color, so they get purple on their name when they set the fastest lap, or something to
Really
indicate
easy.
when they have the fastest lap throughout the race. Just something small and minor, but it's really easy to know who has the fastest lap at that moment. Would be very nice and go a long way in keeping it from being really confusing.
I agree. I hope that we don't have confusion and have to face confusion with what is going on and with that whole situation. But yeah, it'll be interesting. It will change how the playoffs go for some drivers. Someone's going to get eliminated and someone's going to move on because they got enough fastest laps throughout the playoffs. But yeah, moving on from the fastest lap point, we have this is one I think that was completely unnecessary and just didn't make any sense. Of just why did this happen? Why did it need to happen? The rookie stripes are no longer required for a rookie. I mean, it's been something, of course, NASCAR's used since the first day of the sport, rookie stripes. But was it needed to begin with? Maybe not, but I feel like now I think at least it's not necessarily needing to be there, Jay, because rookies are coming to the sport now so well experienced and well versed compared to what they might have been on experience back in the day. But I still think that there was not really a valid reason to take the rookie stripes off the car.
Yeah, we've had this decision now for a month, maybe a little bit more than that, and I still have not been able to find I haven't been able to find one myself, and I haven't seen a decent reason why they would get rid of this rule. It's not a big deal, of course. It's just another thing to gripe about, because that's what we as NASCAR fans love to do, is gripe about everything. But it is kind of silly, and just like, why? I mean, it was nice to have that indication that they were a rookie. I'm sure it did something to the drivers, knowing the person in front of you is a rookie. I don't know if it maybe told them that I can just use this guy up and whatever because they're a rookie and it doesn't matter. But I don't really know the reasoning for taking it away. Again, not a huge deal, but it is also like, why? I think it was fine. There's no reason to need to change it, and they did anyways.
That was my kind of conclusion, is just why. I just haven't been able to come up with one single reason as to why they would bother. I don't even know did they supply a reason as to why. They just kind of did it and said, okay, that's it. Weird for sure. Not really much to go into about that. Just why. There's two more kind of rule changes to touch on. First one, the provisional now for kind of a big big name drivers. So we now know we're going to have 41 cars in the Daytona 500 because Elio Castroneves has been given this new provisional where basically, you're a big name, or Jimmy Johnson could get it, for example, as it was mentioned a few weeks back. But it's really interesting, Jay, that NASCAR has gotten to this point where they're going to give a free pass to a driver that has a recognizable name to just be in their race, and not have to race their way in against normal names in the sport.
Yeah, I've seen both sides on this where it's a good thing and it's a bad thing for this and for that. I personally think it's a good thing because it can guarantee if a driver says that they're going to do this race and they're going to come to NASCAR to run this race, and I don't know, for some reason it makes a fan go to the, well, I say for some reason, but it can make fans want to go to that race to see this specific driver who's coming from a different motorsport to run in NASCAR. It guarantees them to be in the race, and that fan who goes there and spends money will get to see that driver they're there for in the race. So it's kind of the same aspect with the charter system as well, and the sponsors having that guarantee and all that nonsense, which a lot of people don't like the charter system. So I can see why they don't like this either. I think it's okay. I would be okay with it going away or okay with it staying. It doesn't bother me too much. I like the rule. I think it's a good thing. I think it's cool to have somebody wanting to come run NASCAR be guaranteed into the race if they want to give it a shot. But I can also see why some people would say it's a bad rule. It's kind of silly. They should earn their way into the race if they want to be here. They should show they deserve to make the race they want to show up to. But also, I think it's only going to be an issue for one race a year, because when do we really ever get 45 cars coming to the race? It's only for the Daytona 500. So
Yeah.
it's really only going to be an issue once a year.
I can't think of any race outside of Daytona where anybody goes home now. So, yeah, it's a one race issue, if you want to call it an issue. I think NASCAR has gone about it the right way, in terms of he's not eliminating anybody out of the field with his provisional.
Yes,
They're
that's
going to
also a
add a
big
car, and also adding a car to the grid. That's never a bad thing.
Exactly. More cars to see on the track is a good thing for everybody. Maybe not for people watching on TV, because we get to see a zoomed in shot of a window net of the top two anyways. But for people at the track, for sure, that's an extra car to watch a race. It's an extra car for purse money. It's an extra car for a lot of things. So I think it is a good thing. I like the rule. I'm in support of it. And like I said, I think it's really only a once a year issue for the Daytona 500, because I mean, there's maybe 2 other times a year, if that, nowadays, where we have cars showing up and not making the race because there's too many and they have to compete for a spot.
We had another rule change, the Kyle Larson rule, waivers situation. Basically, very straightforward now. You can be granted a waiver for things to make the playoffs still, for things such as medical reasons that you might have missed a race for, or the birth of a child, example like that, etc. But you will no longer, you can still be given a waiver for missing a race for, say, Kyle Larson going to the Indy 500, but he would lose all of his playoff points. Obviously, Jay, when Kyle Larson missed the Coke 600 last year, there was a huge and very strung out drama for probably, it had to have gone on for like at least a month. And it was such a huge talking point that did not need to go on as long as it did, but NASCAR and Hendrick seemed to really take their time with it. But yeah, now it's... Of course, Larson didn't lose any playoff points last year or anything. Now, if the same situation was to happen again, he would lose his playoff points and start the playoffs at 0 points, which is an interesting move. I think we saw maybe it coming because there was a lot of drama around it, and now it kind of really straight lines things, and NASCAR has really drawn a line of, okay, here's what we will grant a waiver for, and here's what we're going to kind of give you consequences for, which is deciding to skip on our races.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, you can call it the Kyle Larson if you want to. I think it also leans more towards suspensions and things like that as well.
That too,
of course,
yes.
That's one thing that they are cracking down on, and they're taking away those playoff points for, is if you get yourself suspended. I think NASCAR
That's a great one.
is more so for that reason than they are for anything else. I think the Kyle Larson thing might just be a bit of a coincidence. I don't know if they were that upset that he chose to run the Indy 500 and then miss the start of the Coke 600. I mean, maybe they were butthurt about it. It is NASCAR. I don't really know. It wouldn't surprise me if they
They
were.
get upset about a lot.
Uh, yeah, they do. They're not very big fans of people doing anything wrong against NASCAR. Uh, but I, you know, I can see why people would be upset. And personally, if it were to happen again this year as well, if somebody like Kyle Larson or whoever went to run the Indy 500 and they missed the start of the Coke 600, they can still get the waiver to be in the playoffs, but they lose their playoff points. I think if that happened again, I would change my mind and be like, okay, this is kind of a dumb rule. Right now, I like it. But that's without there being that situation happening again. Now, of course, uh, at least they still make the playoffs, I guess. The playoff points are crucial. They are extremely important. So uh, it's not like losing those isn't a small deal. It's a very big deal if that happens. But at least NASCAR is letting them still have their playoff berth, I guess. But it's another one of those things. It's another one of those NASCAR rules where both sides make good points and it can go either way. And a certain event falling either way can create a lot of controversy for sure.
It'll be interesting because if unlikely, but it is very possible that the exact same situation happens to Kyle Larson. But they already confirmed that NASCAR would be the priority. They did that same thing last year, then they stuck it out in Indy. But
Yeah.
I do believe this time they would come back for the Coke
And
600.
I believe as well, maybe last year they said NASCAR was a priority, and then they decided to chance it for Larson to finish the Indy 500. Maybe because of the uncertainty with the rule and the uncertainty with when he would get to the car and if they would give him a waiver and whatnot. Now they kind of have a firm idea. I will say NASCAR has put their foot in the ground and made it very firm on what will happen if you do or do not make the start of a race. So I will say maybe if they run into that situation again, well, now they know they have to get to the track. They have to get to Charlotte. So maybe that is the one positive side is NASCAR hasn't made this an iffy thing. It's our foot is in the ground. This is the line. You know what's going to happen if you go across it.
I think a very rare moment in current era NASCAR where we actually have a rule that's firm and we know exactly what the ruling would be, because it feels like we have such a gray area with so many rules now.
Yeah.
In the sport. So it's nice to actually have a firm line. Okay, we know exactly what's going to happen if this guy does this or does that going forward. So it'll be interesting to see if it plays out, because if that happened to Larson again, starting the playoffs with 0 points, or any driver, it almost puts them in maybe not the first round, but the round of 12 or maybe the round of 8 for sure. You're basically having to win to move on. But you put a guy like Larson in the car, of course, he's very capable of doing it, just as many other drivers are. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Before we move on to the next topic, you brought up a point about the cameras being zoomed in on the two cars and whatnot from the Clash, and I just wanted to talk about the broadcast for a few minutes before we move on, because I briefly said earlier, I told you last night too, that clearly I didn't feel like Fox has gotten worse, but they absolutely have not made a ounce of improvement over last year, and there's no way that they don't know. Everyone scrutinizes them because their broadcasts are just not good, and clearly they haven't gotten better. And you mentioned the camera zooms. It's crazy how zoomed in we are at the quarter-mile racetrack. We miss so much when we should be able to see just about everything in a camera shot.
Yeah, like the I think it was Burt Myers, I think was the guy in the 50 car. Him and the Ricky Stenhouse incident. We didn't see what happened with that until almost a full 24 hours later. We didn't get an actual good replay of that. And Jamie Little is sitting there interviewing him, and they show an angle where you can't see anything, and she goes,
what happened?
You see? And he's like, I can't really see anything. And then they switch to a different angle, and you still can't see anything. All you see is Stenhouse is a little bit of his nose, and then the 50 just bang into the wall a couple seconds later. So it's just, I mean, Fox continues every single year to not make improvements. I feel like they put their head in the sand. They don't listen to anything the fans are saying. I feel like, in a lot of areas of life, especially nowadays with social media, the the majority of people can have an influence on things that happen with sports and things like that, and whether a certain rule change happens or a certain format change happens or whatever across the board in all sports. I feel like with NASCAR and maybe Fox specifically, especially when it comes to the broadcast, they put their head in the sand. They will not move. They do not care what anybody says. They're going to keep doing these terrible things, these terrible habits, and make zero changes and get no better every single year. In fact, continue to get worse and really just, I mean, genuinely put the worst spotlight possible on NASCAR.
The broadcasts are just no good. And yeah, looking forward to already, not even a points race down, and I'm already looking forward to moving on to the next broadcast partner, with the whole Amazon and NTNT thing coming in. And excited to see what they can do for the handful of races they get going forward. But yeah, Fox is not going to improve. I almost like feel it's pointless now to complain, because we've complained for so long and they haven't made a single change. So it's like, what's the point anymore?
It's been the same complaints now for years and years and years, and nothing has changed. If anything, it's gotten worse. I mean, the camera shots are, I feel like they are beyond zoomed in nowadays, and just the broadcast quality as far as the booth goes. I mean, that's maybe the one thing I will not complain too much about, at least from this past weekend, is the booth overall didn't make me want to blow my brains out, so that was a positive thing, I suppose. But the silly cartoonish graphics, the zoomed in camera shots, the choices for having, I don't know if they're gonna have the broadcast team at every single race this year. I know that they have mentioned before about having some virtual broadcast done. That's a dumb decision, a really stupid decision. We're at a short track and we don't have certain proper camera angles. And for Kyle Larson, there was a moment where he spun, and the first two angles we get are nose cam and then an interior cam. And the nose cam, he got hit from behind. What are we going to see looking out the front of his car, Fox?
He got hit from
behind. The car he got hit by was behind him. What are we doing? I'm not going to start this rant because I will never stop if I do get started, but I hate Fox production so much.
They're bad. They're terrible. Yeah, let's get done with Fox already, and let's move on, because I know I just talked about it's pointless to complain. I guarantee we go to the Daytona 500 after that. I'm sure there's going to be something we're going to be complaining about. They were showing the fans while they were restarting or something.
I will give Fox one more positive. We didn't have a single green flag commercial break where it wasn't side by side.
That was good.
There's maybe one thing they've listened to. Thank you for that, I guess. Listen to the other complaints, please.
I will give one point of credit. Was I always say in the past, like when NBC takes over, the sport feels legitimate. It feels like it's a huge deal every race, and Fox always made it feel like it was half of a comedy show. I felt like, and that was due to the actual commentators themselves, but I felt like, I don't know if it was just we got lucky, or maybe they, had a bit of a vibe change. It did feel a bit more serious this time around, like this was a serious sport. Still not to the extent that NBC livens up these races and really makes it feel like a big deal, but it did seem to me like it did feel a bit more serious than in the Fox booth has kind of had in the last few years.
Well, yeah, NBC has always been, at least the last several years, has been better than Fox. And now that they have Lee Diffie, I mean, it's miles better than Fox. I'm not sure if there is going to be a way that Fox gets better than NBC now with Lee Diffie. But I will say, like you mentioned, the broadcast this weekend overall did not feel as dead, did not feel as boring. It did feel like they took things more seriously. And I will say, Mike Joy specifically, last year and even the last few years, I would say, just sounds like a guy who's ready to retire, doesn't care about the sport anymore, or at least doesn't put the same enthusiasm into the calls and into the entire broadcast as he used to. You go back and watch, of course, these old races from 08, 09 and beyond being uploaded to YouTube now, you can go back and watch that booth with him and DW and Larry Mack, and they're just all three in there getting amped up and excited for these things happening on track, and it could be a battle for 15th and they're getting excited about it. We just don't really get that nowadays from Fox. I will say, at least with the Clash, Mike Joy did bring a little bit of that enthusiasm back, so that was nice to see. I just hope it continues for the rest of the year, and I kind of hope that translates to Harvick and Boyer as well, because we can go back to the 500 last year, and it's the last lap of the biggest race of the season. Your sport's like second or third biggest driver just gets killed into the wall, and it's we got turned. That's the call we get.
Oh, we got turned.
That on the last lap and the biggest race of the year, that's the call we get. Do better, please.
It's going to be interesting to see all everything about Fox in the 500 weekend, from commentary to camera work and whatnot. We'll move on from that, and we'll see how it goes next weekend. I wanted to talk about a couple more things in the NASCAR world, kind of some quick things here, and specifically going into the new season, 2025, and talking about drivers to watch out for. I'm just going to take a handful of names, and then we're just going to kind of give our expectations for them. I was going to do Shane Van Gisbergen to start, but we already kind of went on about what we thought and expected from him earlier, so we'll pass on that. Let's just start with the Clash winner. Chase Elliott, Jay, obviously last year, one win at Texas, and then he was really quiet the rest of the year. Still had a good season, almost even made the Final Four with only one win, which was quite impressive. But yeah, I mean, what do you think about him going into this year, starting with the win in the Clash? Are we going to see that Chase Elliott of old, where he's going to be winning 3-4 races a year, or do we kind of maybe think he's still kind of stuck in that kind of vibe he's been in the last 2 years?
The Chase Elliott we have seen the last 2 years has not been the Chase Elliott we got for the previous 5-6 years before then. I think him coming out to the Clash, starting off with a win there, starting off in dominant fashion, is certainly going to be a big confidence boost for him. And I think we could see him return to being the Chase Elliott of old for sure. Do I personally want to see that? No, I'm not a Chase Elliott fan. I do not enjoy Chase Elliott winning much at all. But I would not be surprised to see Chase Elliott return to winning form. And let's be honest as well, he's the sport's most popular driver. When Chase Elliott does well, NASCAR does well. So, I will say I hope that Elliott has a good season again. I hope he gets back to winning races. I will just turn off the TV as soon as I see him cross the line.
And maybe not winning a championship, though.
Yeah, I do agree with that.
I think I'm thinking a 2-win year for Chase Elliott. As well, like, again, these new cars, I mean, it's hard to win, 4 or 5 races now. So
yeah, we don't see that anymore at
yeah,
all.
when you do that, it's a big deal. Byron did it a couple years ago. Larson just went insane last year with the 6 wins, which him and Byron the last 2 years were definitely the big ones that have been able to accomplish a lot of wins in a year. So Elliott, I'm thinking like a 2-win year, but I still think the thing that he has going for him is he might not be winning a lot, but he's really consistent. And we saw that last year, 1 win, and he still nearly made the Final Four. So I feel like he's going to have a year just like that again. He just might win 1 more race, is what I'm thinking there. I don't really think he's going to go and win 3 or 4 races, but I expect him to win a race or 2. And how about we didn't really talk about Bubba Wallace. I think we should talk about him because he had a career best year statistically, and missed the playoffs after making the playoffs a year before, which was quite interesting. But obviously, new crew chief. I was listening to Denny Hamlin's podcast earlier, and he has very high hopes for Bubba Wallace and his new crew chief. I know you're a Bubba Wallace fan, of course. So what do you expect for them this year? And do you think as well, maybe it's kind of a Bubba really needs to step up this year type situation as well?
Yeah, I think that you could maybe say that Bubba does need to step up this year. I'm not sure if saying that means that he could lose his ride after the season. I think he really does have the full and complete backing of 2311. But of course, they do have expectations to win. They don't just want to see their 1 car of Tyler Reddick winning. They want to see all 3 now winning, with them opening up the new team with Riley Herbst this year. So
I don't think they'll be seeing all 3.
But of course, they have the hopes to that. I agree. I don't think the Herbst is going to win this year either. But of course, they have hopes that all 3 cars will get into victory lane. So the expansion is big for 2311. Of course, the other drama is big with them as well, with their lawsuit against NASCAR. So a lot of off track stuff, as I mentioned before, going on with Bubba coming into this season. But again, uh, I think it is a big year for him. Like you said, Mitch missed the playoffs last year after making it the year before. Uh, I don't think Bubba wants to be in the situation again this year where he is trying to make the playoffs on points and he's right around that bubble line and it's intense for the last several weeks of the season and it just keeps going back and forth. And if there's a new winner, he's screwed and all that mess. I think he wants to get a win, if not multiple wins this year. And I could see him doing it. He looked really good at Bowman Gray again. I don't know how much you can take away from that race, but I can't think of a time on a short track where I was like, wow, Bubba Wallace is like a genuine top five driver. He has good speed here. He certainly did this past weekend. Hopefully that translates to the rest of the season. I don't know if it will, but it would be nice to see Bubba get a couple of wins this year, get locked into the playoffs, and really be able to build something and get back into the playoffs again and maybe get a little bit further this time. I don't think he's a championship contending driver, of course, yet, but you got to start somewhere. So hopefully he makes it into the playoffs with a couple of wins this year.
I can see, I would say personally, I can see him winning at least one race. And we have seen when he's got the right things going for him, he can be a very consistent driver. So I can see a one win, maybe even two. And honestly, I could see him getting at least to the round of 12 based off of his consistency. And then there, who knows what happens. But I do think Bubba Wallace has the ability to take it a step further this year. Going forward, and of course he's got his new teammate of Riley Herbst. We might as well throw Riley Herbst into the conversation. I'm gonna no offense to Riley Herbst, Jay. The question is simple. Do you think he's gonna be in the top 20 in points or not? I'm gonna go no.
I don't think he'll be in top 20. I would give it maybe top 25. Riley Herbst is one of those drivers when he first came into the Xfinity series, I was not a big fan of. I, like everybody, clowned on him for the way he drove, for the mistakes he made, whatnot. He's improved a lot in the last couple of years. Of course, earned a shot into the Cup Series now. So I have really come to appreciate Riley Herbst the last couple of years. It's really nice to see a driver. Yes, it's because of the backing he has for Monster, but it's really nice to see a driver get the time needed to develop, to get better. He has improved. I don't see him doing anything in the Cup Series as far as winning or making the playoffs this year, or at least for this year. But I do think he's going to have a decent-ish year.
I agree. I think, like I said as well, I was exactly like Jay. Didn't really like Herbst when he first came into Xfinity, but he matured a lot, I felt like, and improved a lot. You don't really see drivers go on that kind of trajectory, but he also was given significantly more time than a lot of drivers ever can even imagine getting to progress their talents. And good on him, because he's at least made it happen and was able to win 2 races last year in the Xfinity Series. Won one race the year before, and he just continues to improve. But still don't think that's necessarily going to translate to necessarily a great Cup Series run. I got 2 more drivers that we're going to go over. We'll go over Trackhouse, specifically Daniel Suarez. Jay, I think obviously my driver, but he is in a contract year, and in previous seasons, he's been the weak link of Trackhouse since Chastain has come in, and now there is more oncoming pressure with Connor Zilisch in the Trackhouse program in his first year with JRM, who I expect to be very talented in that series.
Yeah, I think big things for Zilisch, to be completely honest. He's one of those guys to where you can look at him and go, okay, he's young, he's relatively inexperienced, but I still have big expectations for him. I think GRM has big expectations for him coming into this season. I think Zilisch is a guy that you can look for already to be a top 8 contender in the playoffs when those roll around later in the year. If not, maybe, I mean, depending on how the season goes, maybe a championship 4 contender. But Zilisch is a guy who I think a lot of people have a lot of hope for, and I do as well. I like him a lot.
So what do you think about Suarez, though? Is he very much at risk under pressure from specifically Zilisch to lose his ride? I think, personally, And we haven't even started the year. Unless Suarez goes and wins 5 races or something, I think it's already and if Connor Zilisch just does what he needs to do, I think it's Connor Zilisch getting that 99 immediately.
Oh yeah. I think for Suarez, it is definitely a make or break year, and like you said, it may not matter what he does, unless Trackhouse wants to expand even further, which I'm not sure if they do. I don't see how Suarez is in that 99 again next year. Um, and unfortunately for Suarez, I'm not sure if he'll get another shot in the Cup Series. This is his third team in the Cup Series, third or fourth team, I guess technically in the Cup Series. Uh, and he still has just not been able to find that consistent success. There's been the spurts of it, but it has not been consistent for Suarez. And of course, the one win he got last year in Atlanta was a super speedway, and it was the closest or second closest finish in NASCAR history. So credit, yes, but also credit, no, because he didn't win that race on merit, where he dominated the thing and looked really good and kept that speed up to all the other races on the year. So for Suarez, definitely a make or break year, but like you said, I'm not sure there's anything he really can do to keep that ride for next season.
The last one I'll go over, new driver in the 19, Chase Briscoe. I heard some saying like a year where he has to prove himself, but I feel like he's already. I'm not very high on Chase Briscoe just with how he races some other drivers, but I feel like at his time at SHR, he's proven himself fairly well already. But it is going to be interesting to see how he fits in with his teammates, because he's got big names he's going up against with Denny Hamlin, of course, and then of course Christopher Bell, who's a championship contender every year, just like Denny Hamlin is. Ty Gibbs still hasn't won a race, but we know it's just a matter of time until he probably starts to become a regular race winner. So Briscoe is going up against some pretty steep competition, and I think he might be able to win, a race or two, but personally, I feel like he's going to be the weak link on the team. Although I say weak link, I still see him as a playoff driver for that team, but I just don't see him being able to elevate to the heights of like a Christopher Bell or like a Denny Hamlin.
Yeah, Joe Gibbs' racing lineup overall is by far the second best lineup in the Cup Series. Of course, they're not better than Hendrick, but Hendrick and Joe Gibbs are top 2 as far as their lineups goes, and all 4 of those cars for Joe Gibbs can win on any given week if they don't have mechanical failures. That was something that has plagued them a lot last year and even the last couple of years with this next gen. And you think about this, especially Ty Gibbs last year. I mean, it was a streak of 5 or 6 weeks, it seemed like, where he was just constantly in the garage with some failure going wrong. So when you're a guy like Ty Gibbs and you're in your rookie season and you have all these things going wrong, of course, you're getting less and less track time with that happening as well. So for Chase Briscoe, for Ty Gibbs, both of them, I think they have some expectations, some pressure on them this year. Maybe not so much for Ty Gibbs because he is Joe Gibbs' grandson. He's not going to lose his ride, but of course he has expectations to win. And Chase Briscoe is going to have those same as well. Of course, replacing Martin Truex Jr. with the Bass Pro backing. He's got a multi-year deal. So I think that Joe Gibbs is going to expect him to come in and win some races. And like you said, I do agree. I think Briscoe has already proven himself. I'm not sure if he's a guy who I still doubt at this point. But is he somebody that can win consistent races is maybe the one thing that he has not really proven yet.
I agree, 100%. And I think we'll end this kind of topic of, I'm going to just ask you a simple question. Who do you think is going to win the most races of the Cup drivers this year?
I think Kyle Larson is going to probably wind up winning the most races again this year. I'm not really sure there's a world where he doesn't if he continues on the same form that he had last year. I think for the next several years, Kyle Larson is going to be the the driver winning the most races every single year.
How many?
5-ish.
I'm thinking
like
5
you
or
said
6.
earlier, 5, 6, 7 races. More than that is not really something you see nowadays. But Kyle Larson is the exception. I think we're still going to see about 5 wins from him this year.
You can still lose the championship. So
yeah,
he came out the other day and said he believes he could win 20 races and still lose the championship.
Yeah, and that's the way the format is designed.
That's the way it's designed. Right. But that is not what you want to hear. It's just, I don't know. It certainly plagues the legitimacy of a championship, which is going to take us straight into the next topic. We were going to talk about a bit of F1, but we're actually going to save that. I decided because we're still a ways away from the F1 season, so we'll kind of touch on F1 when we get closer there. So we'll remove that from our topics today. So I wanted to just briefly kind of go into kind of our thoughts on the current state of NASCAR, because it's such a weird position right now with playoff conversations and NASCAR not making any changes to the playoffs and talking about they might do it for next year, not confirmed, but they're at least looking into it. But I mean, Jay, you and I both were big playoff defenders for the longest time, and it's funny because both of us like switched up pretty well at the same time as well to be against it. But I feel like just 2024, we just kind of saw every possible flaw with the playoff system become a reality, from the most winningest driver and dominant driver of the season didn't even have a chance to win the championship. Missed the Final Four completely. The guy that was 14th in the regular season standings wins the championship after he would have missed the playoffs if we didn't have cars running out of fuel in 5 overtimes in Nashville. He quite literally got eliminated from the playoffs at one point and still won the championship. And then we had the whole race manipulation issue from both Chevy and Toyota at Martinsville. It just felt like everything that could be proven to be wrong with the playoff format became a reality in 2024, and it's just really made it a system that is not something I can defend being in the sport anymore.
And it's also funny because you mentioned we used to be playoff defenders. If you go back and listen to old episodes of this podcast from years ago, it would be episodes of us arguing in favor for the playoffs.
Yes.
And the playoff turmoil this past season is the whole reason for us wanting to bring the podcast back this year.
Yeah,
it's one of the main things. As soon as the championship finale was over, I get a text message from Gary, podcast coming back next year. And we have had conversation after conversation after conversation about just how infuriating this point format is nowadays. And I wanted to bring it up a few minutes ago, but I knew we were going to talk about this format, so I saved it until now. It's when this playoff format was first announced, and NASCAR did the win and you're in system and the 5 playoff points for winning races and everything, they said one of their main factors for it was, we want to make winning races count. We want to make every driver who wins a race be important. We want to make every single race important. Every single race matters. All this stuff. It doesn't really make any sense when you look at how the playoffs are nowadays, because Joey Logano was 14th in the regular season standings. He won one race in Nashville in 5 overtimes to get himself into the playoffs, and then won another race later in the year in the round of 8 to open the round of 8 to get into the championship 4. Kyle Larson had 5 wins last year, if not 6. 5 or 6. 6 wins. Did not make the championship 4. How is winning races important when your guy who won the most races did not make the championship round? How can we consistently be saying winning is important, and then the guy who wins the most races does not have a shot at the championship in the final race? It's so silly that we want to say every race matters when no, it really does not. Get your one win and coast until August, and then that's when you want to get one more win and then coast until November. It's just the playoff format. It does not reward winning. It rewards winning once. It doesn't reward winning multiple times. It doesn't reward dominance. It doesn't reward consistency. It rewards one race, and that's it.
So I mean, I agree. I mean, we look at Logano as well. Like, it was mentioned, and just one topic that I kind of thought about was, I've heard some like industry people that are like defending Logano's championship, where it's like, oh, he won 4 races, like that was the second highest amount of wins. But you look at his season overall, he won 4 races, but he ran like crap for a lot of the races that he didn't win. And
exactly.
Then the races that he did win, Nashville, he wasn't even in the top 10 at the start of the first overtime. He was running like dog water. He had fuel to save, and he was able to hang on with that. Of course, he was in position to win Richmond. Give him credit there, and then he got bulldozed out of the way by the 3 car. But you look at the second race he won was the Atlanta race in the playoffs. What happened there, Jay? He was, defended and pushed by his teammate Ryan Blaney to victory lane there. Then
a game we have seen Penske play before at
many
Atlanta.
times.
It's not the first time they've done it.
Las Vegas was
same thing actually.
Las Vegas, he was running what mid-teens, 20th or something like that. They take a gamble on fuel. Then they literally had to have his teammate pushing him down the straightaways and helping him out there. Again, Ryan Blaney. And I remember, and I found this funny because I got proven right at the end. I don't know if you remember, I was texting you during that race. I said, why is Blaney helping him right now? He's screwing himself over for the championship. And guess what happens? Him pushing Logano to the win cost him the championship.
Yeah, and that's the game that Penske is willing to play as well, and they expect their drivers to play the team game, not individual game, and if you don't play that team game, you are out. So, of course, that didn't help Ryan Blaney in the moment, but it helped Team Penske in the moment. So, it's just one of those things you come to expect from Penske and from that organization across the board in all forms of motorsport they're in, which give them credit for. I mean, there is no better well-oiled machine in motorsports than Penske. But yeah, of course, in that moment there, Blaney screws himself, helps his teammate win. And not only does he help his teammate win, he helps his teammate win a championship.
And then you get to that championship race, and the first race all year, Logano shows up with the best car. Very coincidental how that happens in the Final Four race. But Penske, we know Penske's always going to be the cars to beat when it comes to the championship 4, as long as it's at Phoenix Raceway. So we got one more year at least of that. And now I'm just thinking, beyond our playoff talk, another thing, I'm trying to think of other things I'm not happy about. I've complained about the whole kind of switch up on the boys have at it. NASCAR is very against fighting within the sport right now, although they will make sure that everybody sees the fights. They will crack down very hard at it, which is a complete change up, Jay, from where we were 5-6 years ago in the sport, which it doesn't make a lot of sense to me as to why they want to crack down on something like that so much, but just feels like NASCAR is just kind of pulling the reins on the drivers a little bit too much when they are right now in a position where they're praising drivers willing to do anything they got to do to advance their seasons and their playoffs. But God forbid another driver put a hand on another one.
Yeah, it seems like NASCAR is always kind of up and down on the topic of fights in the sport and how aggressive they want the drivers to be and all this stuff. Because you think back to the mid to late 2000s, there was, nothing. We want nothing. Nobody touch each other. Nobody have incidents. You'll get penalized. We'll pretty much end your season if you get into a fight. And then you go into the 2010s and the mid 2010s, and it's, now we have a rule set for fighting. Now we're going to allow it. Now we're going to make a thing called boys have at it to specifically be like, all right, our drivers can have conflict again. They can go at each other. They can fight. They can do all this, do all that. And then now we're kind of back at the area again where it's like, okay, no more of this, no more fighting. And in a few years, we'll get back to, kill each other again. So it's just NASCAR seems to really change their mind every few years on what they want the drivers to do as far as conflict goes. I personally think they should just let them have conflict. They should let them get mad at each other. It's an emotional sport. Emotions run high in
physical
sports, and especially in NASCAR, where, you're in a vehicle and you don't have a way to express your emotions without either using that vehicle or stepping out of that vehicle and slamming your fist into somebody's face if they really pissed you off. So, of course, NASCAR does not want you using the vehicle, which I agree. You shouldn't use the vehicle either. Get out of the car and throw hands. So I think NASCAR, they'll eventually move on it again. They'll eventually want the fights to come back. Of course, they also want to have those fights because they want to market it, because what do they do every time a fight happens? They market it, and then 2 days later, they give a penalty for it. So, I don't know. We're in this weird thing again where it's, hey, don't do this, but hey, also, did you see our YouTube clip of that fight last weekend? Hey, go watch this.
A million views.
But also, we penalized them. Don't do this, but also go watch it. So, yeah, they're kind of just being weird on it again. It'll eventually change.
it always goes back and forth. It will continue to do that for literally decades to come. So they'll be all embracing the fighting at some point, probably in about 4 or 5 years from now. But yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything else on like the state of NASCAR that you're passionate about, or?
I think we've covered most of it so far,
Yeah,
aside from maybe vehicle stuff with the cars.
make the car better,
Excuse me.
please.
Yeah, make NASCAR cars
Bring
again.
horsepower back.
Horsepower is the biggest thing I want. Diffuser gone, please. Just get rid of it. I understand that might fuck up the entire underbody of the car, and they designed it to be a specific way, so maybe they can't get rid of it. But we also had the COT designed to have the valence and the wing, and they got rid of that after a couple of years. So come on, NASCAR, you can do it. But we keep also hearing the excuse, or at least we used to, we don't anymore, because NASCAR won't even talk about the horsepower issue nowadays. But it used to be, oh, we're reducing horsepower to attract manufacturers and
Where are they?
make it easier on the teams and all that stuff. Yeah, where are the manufacturers? Where is making it easier on the team? They're not building any different engines. They're the exact same engine they were a decade ago. You just put a little spacer on there to quote unquote reduce the horsepower. They're still the same strong engines. They still cost the exact same amount of money they did a decade ago. Why do we still need the restrictions? Make changes. Give us the horsepower back. I beg.
And we're only a few years away from it being a decade since they use that excuse as to we'll attract more manufacturers as one of the kind of leading points to get rid of the horsepower. And we have at that point we had 3 manufacturers, and we still have these same 3 manufacturers. It hasn't really gone anywhere, and who knows if it will go anywhere. Only time will tell on that one for sure. Let's see here. We got 2 more topics. One really quick one to kind of finish off the NASCAR side of things before we talk about our IMSA experience at the Daytona 24 Hours. And we are going to talk about some NASCAR gaming news here because, of course, this is going to be on my GOWEN channel on YouTube, which is a NASCAR gaming channel. But as well, Jay and I are very passionate about NASCAR games. It's how we quite literally met 12 years ago. Of course, NASCAR 25 coming out with iRacing and Monster Games developing it. They said already fall 2025. Jay, big news for the first time. We're getting ARCA in a NASCAR game. So we're getting Cup Series, of course, Xfinity, Trucks, and ARCA. We still don't know a lot about the game, but that was quite a big kind of drop that just came out of nowhere. That was quite unexpected because I remember, a week before that announcement, I was saying I'd be happy with just Cup and Xfinity, but here they are adding the top 3 series and then going above and beyond and already adding something that no one's been able to add in previous years.
Yeah, and they were pretty vague in that press release as well on actual details of the game, which of course I'm sure they're doing on purpose because they probably haven't fully decided on a whole lot of features for the game and seen what they can actually put into it. But knowing that the top 3 series plus ARCA is going to be in the game I think it's a really big deal. It's a really cool thing to have ARCA in the game. It's also really interesting to note, again, don't read too much into it, I suppose, but they do make it seem like you're going to be able to own a team or control an existing team, which I think controlling an existing team would be kind of a cooler thing than actually making your own team and not just taking over one driver car and then that's the only car you control. I want to be able to control Hendrick Motorsports or JRM and Xfinity or whatever. That'd be kind of neat. But again, that's a long way away. We still don't know a whole lot about the game, but knowing that those 4 series are in the game, I think is a big deal. It's going to be really nice and not just be Cup. It will be nice to have an actual it will be nice to have an actual ladder to work through to get your way to the Cup Series, and it's nice to have that in the first installment of iRacing's console NASCAR game.
I think it's always important for just the career modes to have a proper progression, and I think obviously they've got exactly what they need right off the bat to make that happen from ARCA, work your way up through Trucks and Xfinity and Cup and whatnot. But as Jay mentioned, so vague about the what we do know in that press release as well. So it's kind of hard to talk about the game right now. There's not really much to lead off of except the fact that now we know there is 4 series and maybe some kind of ownership situation and whatnot. And I just hope, Jay, I mean, we've seen it before. I hope that you're not like forced to own your own team or something like that. Like you have a choice, because I hate when you're like forced into that and you can't just go drive for another team, or if you can only drive for a team and never own your own thing. Like you got to have both of those things as an option.
Yeah, having an option like that is very nice, and it also, for either somebody just playing the game or somebody like you to have to be able to, or to have that option to maybe even build a storyline of, you start out as a driver, you work your way up to the all 4 series, and then you take the Denny Hamlin route, you run in Cup for so many years, and then, hey, you know what, I have enough money now, let me start my own team and let me go run for it like Brad Keselowski. And so having that as an option would be nice, but also potentially wishful thinking. It is their first installment of the game. I'm not gonna, whether they do or don't have certain features, I'm not gonna harp on them too much as long as the game runs well. There's a good foundation for it, and they have a plan to expand on it in the future. I'm not gonna put too high of expectations on this first game. However, if I'm still not gonna just sit there and go, well, this game kind of sucks, but it's their first game, so it's whatever. Like, I still want it to be good, but it doesn't have to be loaded and packed with all these things. They can do that in the future as long as they have a good basis to start on. Then that's what is important to me.
I think that's the big thing this year, is just the foundation needs to be right. It needs to play well, needs to feel right. And as well, I always talk about the AI needs to be good though, because that's a,
Yeah,
in any racing game, the AI is the, unless you're
crucial.
league
Very
racing
crucial.
only, yeah, the AI is the main thing that basically makes or breaks the experience for you in the game. So they have to get the AI right. And I have fairly high hopes, because knowing Monster Games is developing, I've always been a fan of their AI in previous NASCAR Heat games. So obviously, new engine, who knows how it's going to go. But I do have some high hopes there. But yeah, I mean, if they get the AI wrong and there's like no life to them and there's no variables with the AI, then that takes away so much of the fun in the NASCAR games, and it kind of makes it hard to enjoy the game long term. And really, to me, just if the AI, they don't get it right, it almost feels pointless playing a NASCAR game.
Yeah, I agree with that. AI is a very important part of the game, especially when it comes to the single player side. I mean, it is probably the second most important thing when it comes to the single player side. Of course, I would say that the handling model is maybe the most important thing overall of the game, which I hope they get right as well, which I think they will. I have no doubt really in my mind that I think that iRacing is going to take handling model and AI very importantly with this new game. So I think that AI is a big deal to them. I hope that they get it right, like you said. If they just kind of seem lifeless and they just run like slot cars and they make no mistakes, they run the exact same line, all the drivers do the exact same thing, that would be disappointing. You want to see them run different lines, make mistakes, have different strategy calls, maybe things like this.
Yes.
I mean, it's all wishful thinking, of course. It's all just, we want this. Are we going to get it? Who knows? But things like that can really make a game feel much different. Just small things like a difference in strategy, or if mechanical failures exist, that could be a big difference in how your race goes from one week to the next, and
AI
things
Rex.
like that. So AI Rex is a important part as well. I don't want to only have the cautions come out when I decide to dump the guy in front of me. I want them to make mistakes in places and have crashes. And I also, if I decide to drive through the guy in front of me, I don't want to just drive through them and they go and just keep driving. I want to, if I want to dump them, I want to dump them. So hopefully that happens as well.
And you can't tell me they can't make that happen, because we've seen rivalry systems built into the NASCAR games forever, where they will definitely get back at you. So that's something they can pull off for sure. We'll definitely have a lot more to talk about the game in the coming months as we continue to learn more about that. But yeah, as of right now, not a whole lot known about the NASCAR 25 title. So we'll lead now into our final topic, which was the IMSA 24 Hours of Daytona. Jay and myself were actually able to experience it in real life. We went down and took in both weeks of racing from the week before with just the practice sessions, and then, of course, the lead up through into qualifying the following week, and then a few more practice sessions, seeing lower series races, and then, of course, the main race being the 24 hours of Daytona. I didn't really know myself, like, what to expect. I had always heard that fan access. I remember just NASCAR people specifically gloating about how good fan access is in NASCAR, and then I would see like comments that, well, IMSA is way better than NASCAR is in terms of fan access. So I was curious to see what it was going to actually be like, and for basically a VIP NASCAR experience that I had last year, I was able to get more out of a casual fan access experience with IMSA this year. It was just unbelievable. What, like, they just let you go right up to the cars and take it all in, and the only thing we had to worry about, Jay, was just making sure that we were out of the way of moving cars and teams the whole time. Otherwise, they give you pretty well unlimited access other than just going in the garage or something.
Yeah, the only thing you really can't do is just go in the garages, and like you said, you got to be careful because they are coming through there with the cars. They're coming through there on their little golf carts, and they're hauling through the garage, and they're not just going to deliberately run over you, but you can, have mistakes happen and mishaps happen in the garage area. So that was the one thing to pay attention to. But just the overall access, I mean, NASCAR has very good fan access, but there is no matching IMSA, which is all I had heard on social media before, was that there is no matching the access of IMSA. Was not quite aware of it until I experienced it myself, and they weren't kidding. Of course, we didn't go down onto the grid because there was already just, I mean, thousands probably, or close to, if not thousands, at least 1,000 people down on the grid when we got there. We wouldn't have gotten anywhere when we got there, but I mean, people were able to walk up to the cars on the grid. They were able to put their hand on it, take pictures, talk to the drivers, talk to team members. You could talk to team members in the garage. You could see drivers coming to and from in the garage. Like, the access in IMSA was quite literally insane. There was even at one point I believe we went into the driver's RV lot. Had no idea that's what that was.
Yeah.
We went in there by accident. We weren't stopped. We weren't told not to go there. Pretty sure we weren't supposed to be there. But there's almost nowhere they don't allow you to go aside from right into the pit lane, and then specifically heavily marked off areas where they do have some security. But for the most part, the access around Daytona and around IMSA is just absolutely crazy. There was so much we could go and do and see. And we had a 24-hour race. We had the Roar before. We had all the practice sessions, and there's still a lot that we didn't do, and I want to go back and do more.
Yeah, I know there was definitely stuff we didn't touch on when we were there, and yeah, it's just unbelievable. You could go anywhere. There were so many different places to just take in the racing action, from the first hairpin to, well, then you could go down towards the second hairpin. Then you got the
entire infield.
The entire infield over by where they turn onto the oval, and we sat pretty well in every different location in that infield. So we took in a lot of stuff. Then you could walk to the fence behind you that is on the side of the oval, and you could watch them head on to the turn one banking and rip up through there, which, listening to the Cadillac specifically, what was incredible. Really, the Cadillac was the only car I felt that was just really, really loud and actually needed the hearing protection of the IMSA grid specifically, because those Mazdas were unbelievable. That was so loud.
Yeah, that was the loudest thing I've ever heard. And I saw on Reddit beforehand, I was reading through a thread, and somebody was saying that they've been to NASCAR races and the Mazdas were still the loudest thing they'd ever heard. And I thought maybe he was exaggerating. I mean, the Mazda cars, they produce like 200 horsepower. There's no way. But no, he was right. Those little Angry Bees are the loudest car I've ever heard in my life. And you stack 25 or 30 of them, however many they had together. It's just, I mean, the noise was insane. Those Mazdas are incredibly loud.
So loud. Yeah, he needed hearing protection, even under the cautions. Even it still needed to have my ears covered. So unbelievably loud, but still, it was very cool to watch. We only saw the first of two races. We missed a massive pile up the morning after in race number 2, which sucked. But it was still cool to take in that race and experience that. But I mean, like, focusing on like the main 24 hours of Daytona, I felt like, we had a great experience as well. I mean, we were able to, even during the race, go wherever we wanted. We spent the very large majority of it in the grandstand, and I think what was one flaw for sure was just the fact that, Jay, we only had one screen to see everything. Yeah. So if you weren't sitting, we sat deliberately by that screen over by the first turn, had a good view, could see the entire track for the most part. But if you sat in the tri-oval or towards the entrance of pit lane, you didn't really have any idea what was going on, because there was just all the other screens were covered off by Rolex sponsorship.
Yeah, I'm not really sure why either, and apparently that's a common thing they do for the Rolex as well, because I had seen some comments after the race of people saying the exact same thing, and they wish they would stop doing that every year. For some reason, I guess they only use those screens during the NASCAR weekend. But yeah, it's weird because we're able to sit over in turn one, see the screen, you know what's happening, and you move down, and then all of a sudden you kind of lose all sense of what's going on, and now you're not really able to, unless you pull out your phone and stare at a leaderboard or stare at the stream of the race or whatever. You're not really going to be able to know what's going on. So it was kind of weird to not have those screens being used, but it was nice to have that at least in turn one, because you could see them entering the infield, you could see them in the infield, you could see them exiting onto oval one, and then look up onto the screen, and there you go. You can see what's happening, and there's the scoring tower right there and all that stuff too. So it was nice to have the ability to know what's going on while at the racetrack. I just wish they would do a better job of it.
Yeah, I agree, because although we moved, I reluctantly moved because I was like, well, we're not going to be able to know what's going on anywhere else. And I kind of wanted to.
Yeah,
I wanted to know what was happening.
Yeah, that part didn't really cross my mind too much before we moved. It did, but it wasn't that big of a worry for me. And then we moved, and then I was like, okay, I don't really know much of what's going on anymore. So, it was nice to go back and sit in turn one, but it was also nice as well to have not only the time in the race, but the ability to just also, you know what, we're tired of sitting in the grandstands. Let's take a tram into the infield. Now we can walk around and go to the garages if we want. We went on the Ferris wheel. We rode the Ferris wheel, which was really nice. Aside from one of our group, Austin, he absolutely hated that. I thought he was going to either throw up or pass out on the Ferris wheel. He did not have a fun time on that thing. To his credit, it looked like it was put together by a 10-year-old, so it was really sketchy, but also it was neat to say we've been on the Daytona Ferris wheel now.
It was cool, and it was right over top of that Lake Lloyd, and one thing that sucked is when we went on it, they were under safety car. I would have loved to see them under green flag conditions, ripping around, but it was even under safety car, it was still like cool to take in and experience those cars going all around you and so much further down below. So it was really cool. We went and saw the fireworks, which was like a 4 or 5 minute fireworks show, which was great. And then we went back to our Airbnb, and then we came back the next morning to take in the final hours. And we sat back towards turn one so we could see the screen again and understand what was going on. And I said it before, I found it hard once we left the race and came back. I found it hard to get back into it until that first safety car came out, and then everyone got grouped back together, and then I was like, okay, here's where we are. I understand everything that's happening. And then I was just fully engaged again from that point on, and leading into the final 5-6 hours that we watched that race.
Yeah, I think we got there with about 5-ish hours left, and that safety car happened with 4 or something left, I think, something like that. So there was a decent chunk of time left after that safety car, and I mean, from then on, it was just balls to the wall. We had the drama with the BMW and the Corvettes and the GTs. So glad when Corvette eventually got their quote-unquote revenge. I don't believe it was on purpose, but they still did get revenge on the BMW and knocked him out of the podium position, which was really nice. You had the constant fighting in the GTPs, and then they would get into traffic, and the two Porsches would then get caught by the BMW, and then it would go back and forth, and the Acura got involved in it at one point. The LMP2s, nobody wanted to win that class. Apparently, they kept having mechanical failures, and
it was a curse to lead.
There was one point where they wrecked each other for the lead, and then of course, the drama after the race as well, which I guess we can touch on later. But there was so much going on that I didn't know where to watch on the racetrack. You'd start watching one part of the racetrack, and one of you two is watching something else, and I get pointed to something else that's happening, and then it's like, well, there's just it's almost overwhelming, but it's a good overwhelming, because there's just so much going on with the 4 different classes. You don't know what to pay attention to in a moment like that.
And then the GT classes, the scraps were incredible, especially right towards the end of the race. They were just physicality. It was a NASCAR level of physicality. They were just scrapping it out, moving each other, banging doors, and then Jay alluded to the Corvette and BMW situation there, which was unfortunate how it started, but of course it came around that BMW kind of got justice served on them a little bit after using one of their cars to block the Corvette for so long. And then, of course, it was a Ford Mustang that won that class. And of course, the overall race, the Penske Porsches won that one. Go on.
And Tommy Milner, by the way, what a badass he is.
Yeah, with the hand out the window.
Well, not only that, but he gets his half of his the rear of his car, the quarter panel of his car, ripped off, hanging off, flapping in the wind, and he stays out on track for the next 4 or 5 laps and continues to just hold up the BMW, block the crap out of him, and continue leading that class and show his displeasure, obviously, by getting his hand out that little tiny window, showing that the BMW, he is his number one fan, and just continue to still for a while, even with getting the damage repaired and still having it come undone again, continuing to lead the class, have a shot at the win of that race. Of course, in the end, the two Mustangs got, I think, first and second or first and third in the GTs. So, Corvette didn't exactly get the win that they wanted, but with a half-broken car, I'm sure the downforce on that thing was killed. Milner still was able to put on an impressive show and was still able to show the BMWs who's boss, and clearly was still faster and better than them because they have to use a teammate for like the last 4 hours of the race to block for him.
Yeah, it was funny to watch from our view, and we had a great view of it all too, of that all going down for the while that it did. And yeah, LMP2, it was, I don't even remember who won, but if I'm not mistaken, they got disqualified like a few days after, right?
Yeah, they got disqualified. I believe it was because of they had too much of the bottom of the car scrape off,
yes,
I believe is what I read. And so they didn't meet minimum measurements for the underbody, I think, or something like that. So they got disqualified, and before that happened, there was Spike, who's the team car to Rexy. His car had a mechanical failure. First and second dumped each other at one point. There was another point, and I think the safety car you and I were talking about where we got locked back into the race, that was the then LMP2 leader's car dying.
Yeah,
I think 1 or 2 more occasions of LMP2 leaders with their cars having issues. So nobody wanted to win LMP2 for some reason.
It was cursed leading the LMP2 class that weekend. It was such an incredible experience, and absolutely want to see it again. Jay can go to Road Atlanta, which is not terribly far from you, to take in IMSA. I can go to Most Sport in Canada, not too far away from myself. I would love to get an opportunity to take that in. The race you'd be going to would be a lot longer than the one I'd be going to, though.
Yeah.
But I think
endurance race.
Yeah, and the Canada one's only like an hour and a half or something like that. So, but definitely feel like after that experience, like fully invested in IMSA, even after already having an interest. I would watch the races in the background a lot last year. But now I'm just fully feel like I'm invested into it, like excited for the next race now.
Yeah, I agree. I was always casually invested into IMSA. I enjoyed the 24. Obviously, I usually would only watch when they had their endurance races. I would keep up on Twitter when they had their shorter races, usually because I follow Wind Taylor Racing, so I'd see updates through them. Wouldn't really ever watch any of the shorter races. I most likely will try to watch most, if not all, of the races this year. I know that a lot of the times they kind of compete with NASCAR, and I'm not really going to put on anything over NASCAR, but I will try to watch when I can. And just IMSA overall is a super fun, super competitive series, super scrappy series. Like you mentioned, the GTs, they go at it. They race incredibly hard. The GTPs, not so much because their cars can't really handle it as much. But when they do race and when they do go at it, they go at it a lot. They will scrap it out like we saw Kamui Kobayashi at one point during the 24 hours. He got in the car and just immediately took over the race. He was a badass in that car for the couple of stints he was in it before it got destroyed. The 4-wide pass where he's in the wall while passing cars. So IMSA, they go at it. They race hard. They race tough, and they put on a big time show.
Fantastic time, and can absolutely recommend it to anybody that's interested in maybe going to see any form of IMSA race. But outside of that, do you have anything left to add in at all, Jay? Or I think that is it.
I think we about covered it for this first episode.
Yeah.
I think that's about it.
Well, there we go. We've done it. We were planning for an hour. It almost ended up 2.
Yeah, I knew that would happen.
Yeah, usually how it used to go back in the
yeah.
day. So, yeah, good first episode. We'll be back likely next week, unless maybe it's a completely dead week. We'll just wait till the Daytona 500 when that's done and wrapped up, but we'll wait and see what's going on there. But nonetheless, yeah, that's going to be the first episode here of the GOWEN Racing Podcast 2025, and we will see you guys soon enough as we kick off the beginning of the NASCAR season. So thank you again for taking the time to listen to Jay and I ramble on, and we'll see you guys later.